The moment Carolyn Mason realized she had become the family disappointment wasn't loud or dramatic. It arrived silently, wrapped in the smell of roasted chicken and passive-aggressive concern during Christmas dinner. Her uncle carved the meat with unnecessary force, speaking of her life as if it were a temporary error waiting to be corrected. They reminded the table that while her cousins held impressive corporate titles, she was still just a waitress at Marrow and Vine, a 29-year-old with a resume interrupted by life. Under the table, Carolyn smoothed her linen napkin until her knuckles turned white, absorbing their pity like a stain she couldn't wash out. She had no idea that a quiet, observant stranger sitting in the corner of her restaurant was about to rewrite the timeline her family so desperately judged. Welcome to Life in Stories. I'm thrilled to have you here. This is where we dive deep into compelling narratives, explore complex characters, and unravel fascinating plot twists. If you love getting lost in a good story, hit that subscribe button. Let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. The air inside the Miller residence smelled of roasting rosemary, expensive Cabernet, and the specific, suffocating scent of maternal disappointment. It was 2 o'clock on Christmas Day. Carolyn, 29 years old and wearing a sweater that she knew her mother found drab, stood near the sideboard. She was ostensibly arranging the silver platter of deviled eggs, but in reality, she was making herself small. Invisibility was a skill she had honed over the last 4 years, a survival mechanism developed to navigate the treacherous waters of family gatherings. It's just about trajectory, isn't it? The voice belonged to Uncle Marcus. He was holding a wine glass by the stem, gesturing vaguely at the ceiling as if the concept of trajectory lived in the crown molding. He wasn't speaking to Carolyn, of course. He was speaking to her cousin, Julianne. Julianne was the sun around which the family currently orbited. 26, engaged to a patent lawyer, and recently promoted to junior partner at a boutique marketing firm in Chicago. She glowed. She actually glowed, her skin reflecting the recessed lighting, her laughter a melodic chime that seemed to validate everyone's genetic contribution to her existence. I mean, you have to seize the market while you're young, Marcus continued, his voice booming. Carolyn, you remember that, don't you? When you were looking at grad schools. The room went quiet. It wasn't a malicious silence, which almost made it worse. It was the silence of pity. Carolyn turned, forcing a smile that didn't reach her eyes. I remember, Uncle Marcus. Such a shame, Aunt Patricia whispered loudly to Carolyn's mother, though she made no attempt to lower her voice. She had so much potential. Was it the pressure, do you think? Some girls just aren't built for the corporate grind. It's brave, really, to choose a simpler life. Brave. The word landed like a slap. They looked at her and saw a waitress. They saw a woman approaching 30 with no ring on her finger, no mortgage to her name, and a bachelor's degree in economics collecting dust in a storage unit. They saw a failure to launch. Carolyn looked down at her hands. They were dry, the knuckles slightly red from the industrial sanitizer she used 6 days a week. They didn't know these hands. They didn't know that the simpler life involved 12-hour shifts on her feet. They didn't know that the failure wasn't a lack of ambition, but a hostage situation. 5 years ago, when her father died, the life insurance policy turned out to be a fiction. The family business, the one that paid for Julianne's prep school and her mother's Lexus, was hemorrhaging money. Carolyn had been 2 weeks away from starting her PhD program at the London School of Economics. She had the acceptance letter framed. She had made a choice in a lawyer's office while her mother wept softly in the corner. She liquidated her savings. She declined the PhD offer. She took the job that offered the fastest, most liquid cash, high-end service. She quietly paid the property taxes her mother didn't know were overdue. She paid the tuition gap for her younger brother, Leo, telling him it was a scholarship. She wasn't drifting. She was the anchor. But anchors, by design, drown so the ship can stay afloat. So, Julian chirped, turning her beam of light onto Carolyn. Are you still at that place? The one on 4th. Marrow and Vine, Carolyn said. Her voice was steady, surprising even herself. Yes. We're fully booked for the season. Oh, fun, Julian said, though the words sounded like how sad. I guess you get good tips. It's good for, now. You know, until you figure out what you want to be when you grow up. Laughter rippled through the room. It was gentle, teasing. Family banter. Carolyn felt a physical heat rising in her chest, a tightness behind her eyes. It wasn't anger. It was the agonizing friction of being perceived as a child by people whose financial survival depended on her adult sacrifices. She wanted to scream. She wanted to pull the bank statements from her purse and slam them onto the mahogany table. I own this dinner, she wanted to say. I bought the wine you're drinking. But she didn't. That wasn't the deal. The deal was dignity for her mother, and silence for her. Excuse me, Carolyn said softly. I need to check the roast. She walked to the kitchen, the linoleum cool beneath her socks. She didn't go to the oven. She went to the window above the sink. The suburban street outside was gray and still, covered in a slushy remnants of snow. She gripped the edge of the granite counter, her knuckles turning white. She breathed in through her nose, holding the air until her lungs burned, then exhaled slowly. 1, 2, 3. She caught her reflection in the dark window pane. A pale face, dark eyes, hair pulled back in a severe, practical bun. She didn't look like a victim. She looked tired. The door swung open behind her. It was her mother, carrying empty wine glasses. Carolyn, honey, her mother sighed, placing the glasses in the sink. Don't hide in here. It looks sullen. Patricia was just asking if you're seeing anyone. She has a nephew, a mechanic. He's very stable. I'm not hiding, Mom. I'm breathing. Well, breathe faster, her mother said, distracted, wiping a smudge off the counter. And fix your lipstick. You look washed out. We just want you to be happy, Carrie. We worry. We worry. The ultimate insult disguised as love. Carolyn looked at her mother, really looked at her. She saw the lines of stress that had smoothed out over the last few years, the peace of mind that Carolyn's secret money had purchased. Her mother was happy. Ignorant, but happy. I'm fine, Mom, Carolyn said. The lie tasted like ash. Actually, I have to go. Go? We haven't had pie. I got called in. Carolyn lied. She hadn't been called in. She was scheduled. She had requested the shift. Holiday rush. Someone sick. You know how it is. Oh, Carolyn, her mother groaned. On Christmas? Really? Can't you tell them no? It's just serving food. Carolyn stiffened. She walked past her mother, grabbing her coat from the mudroom hook. She didn't say goodbye to the room of relatives. She didn't hug Julianne. She walked out the back door into the biting cold, the silence of the snow instantly soothing the noise in her head. 40 minutes later, the world had changed. The soft, pitying lighting of the living room was replaced by the stark, razor-sharp halogen of the pass. The smell of rosemary was replaced by the intense, complex aromas of truffle oil, searing wagyu, and reduced balsamic. Marrow and Vine was not a diner. It was a theater of war, and Carolyn was its general. She moved through the dining room with a fluid grace that made the chaotic environment look like a ballet. She wore all black, crisp, tailored, severe. The drab sweater was gone. Here, her hair wasn't severe, it was professional. Her lack of a smile wasn't sullen, it was focused. Table 4 needs a sommelier, Table 7 is dragging on the appetizers, and the VIP in the corner wants to know if the scallops are diver or dayboat, the hostess whispered frantically as Carolyn swept past. I got 4, Carolyn said, her voice dropping an octave, commanding and cool. Tell the kitchen to fire Table 7 now. I'll smooth it over with a comped round of Prosecco. And tell the VIP the scallops were harvested this morning off the coast of Maine, and if he doubts it, I'll bring him the tag. She didn't wait for a response. She moved. She poured a distinct, vintage Barolo for Table 4, describing the terroir with an intellect that would have silenced Uncle Marcus. She managed the emotional temperaments of a volatile head chef and 3 stressed runners. She calculated bills, memorized allergies, and orchestrated the flow of 200 people's evenings without breaking a sweat. Here, her age didn't matter. Her marital status didn't matter. Her family's disappointment was a ghost that couldn't cross the threshold of the service entrance. She stood at the POS station, tapping in an order, her eyes scanning the floor. She saw everything. An empty water glass at table 12. A dropped napkin at table 3. A couple on the verge of an argument at table 9. She controlled the atmosphere. She was the architect of their experience. The kitchen doors swung open, unleashing a cloud of steam and shouting. The chef caught her eye, looking panicked. The expo line was crashing. Carolyn didn't flinch. She stepped forward, buttoning her blazer. She walked into the heat, into the noise, into the chaos that terrified everyone else but made her feel strangely calm. At home, she was the disappointing daughter. The cautionary tale. At work, she wasn't invisible. She was essential. But as she picked up the tray for table 7, the front door chimed. A massive group of 12 walked in, snow on their coats, loud and demanding, shaking off the cold. The holiday rush wasn't ending. It was just beginning. Carolyn tightened her grip on the tray. It was going to be a long night. The rush hit at 7:15 p.m. like a rogue wave capsizing a dinghy. It was the specific, frantic madness of the week between Christmas and New Year's Eve, when the city's collective inhibition dissolved into expensive wine and impatience. The ambient noise of marrow and vine rose from a dull hum to a deafening roar of clattering silverware, laughter, and the aggressive clinking of glass. Kevin, the floor manager, a man hired 3 months ago because his uncle knew the owner, was disintegrating. He stood by the point-of-sale terminal, his forehead slick with sweat, staring at the seating chart as if it were a bomb he didn't know how to defuse. With 3 servers down, Kevin stammered, wiping his hands on his trousers. The kitchen is dragging 20 minutes on end. Reese. Table 6 is threatening to leave. Carolyn walked past him, her arms laden with 3 steaming plates of ossobuco. She didn't stop. She didn't panic. She merely adjusted her trajectory. "Kevin, stop looking at the screen," she said, her voice cutting through the noise, low and sharp. "Go to the bar. Pour 3 glasses of the house Prosecco. Take them to table 6. Tell them the chef is preparing a special amuse-bouche just for them. Then go to the kitchen pass and tell Marco to stop plating the risottos until the steaks are rested. He's bottlenecking his own line." Kevin blinked, looking at her like she had just spoken Aramaic. Are you sure?" "Move," Carolyn said. It wasn't a request. She dropped the plates at table 4 with a seamless, charming smile. The ossobuco, braised for 6 hours, enjoy, and then spun on her heel. The smile vanished the second her back was turned. She was a ghost in the machine. She moved through the dining room, refilling water glasses that weren't hers, clearing appetizers from tables that weren't in her section, and whispering commands to the younger, terrified servers. She was the invisible current keeping the ship from crashing into the rocks. At table 9, a small two-top near the back corner, a man sat alone. He was easy to miss. He wasn't loud. He wasn't demanding. He wore a charcoal overcoat that he hadn't checked at the front, and a dark turtleneck that absorbed the dim lighting. He had a book on the table, a vintage paperback, spine-creased, but he wasn't reading it. He was watching the room. Specifically, he was watching Carolyn. He didn't watch her with the predatory gaze she was used to, the hungry looks from men who thought a 20% tip bought them the right to touch her waist. His gaze was clinical, analytical, like an engineer listening to an engine, isolating the one piston that was doing all the work. Carolyn felt eyes on her. It was a sixth sense developed over years of serving. She swung by table 9, water pitcher in hand. "Still doing okay with the sparkling water?" she asked, her voice practicing the automatic warmth of the trade. The man looked up. He had gray eyes, sharp and unsmiling, framed by the early onset of silver at his temples. He looked to be in his late 30s, perhaps 40. There was a stillness about him that felt dangerous in the midst of the chaos. "I'm fine," he said. His voice was a deep baritone, quiet but distinct. "But your manager isn't." Carolyn paused. She glanced at the bar, where Kevin was currently dropping a glass shaker. It shattered loudly. The restaurant went silent for a microsecond before the noise resumed. "It's a busy night," Carolyn said diplomatically. "Holiday season." "It's not the season," the man said. He picked up his glass, swirling the water. It's the logistics. The flow is wrong. The kitchen is firing too fast for the floor to run, and that man over there has lost the room. You, however, seem to have found it. Carolyn tightened her grip on the pitcher. I just deliver the food, sir. Do you? He took a sip. I've watched you salvage 3 tables in the last 10 minutes. You rerouted the runners. You paced the VIP section. You run this place well. I don't run this place, Carolyn corrected him, a hint of steel entering her voice. She didn't like being perceived this closely. It felt like a violation of her camouflage. I just work here. A distinction without a difference tonight, he murmured. He went back to looking at the room. The conversation was over. Carolyn walked away, unsettled. He came back 2 nights later, and then again on New Year's Eve. He never brought a date. He never ordered more than a main course and water. He sat at table 9, the worst table in the house, near the drafty service door. He became a fixture, a silent statue amidst the holiday whirlwind. Carolyn learned his name from the credit card slip, Nathan Carpenter. No corporate card. No flashy platinum. Just a standard bank card. She found herself oddly drawn to his table, not for the tips, which were standard, exactly 20%, never more, never less, but for the silence. Table 9 became the eye of the hurricane. On New Year's Eve, the restaurant was a kaleidoscope of glitter and desperation. The countdown was an hour away. The kitchen was 80 tickets deep in the weeds. Carolyn's feet were throbbing with a pulse of their own. She had been on her feet for 10 hours. She stopped at table 9 to clear his plate. You're limping, Nathan said. He didn't look up from his plate. I'm fine, Carolyn said automatically. Left foot. You're favoring the heel. Cheap shoes. Carolyn bristled. Practical shoes. And I have 3 other tables waiting. Tell me, Nathan said, finally looking up. He pushed his empty plate aside. Why didn't you scream at the hostess just now? She double-seated your section. You had every right to be angry. It cost you turnover time. Carolyn blinked, surprised he had noticed the error. She's 19. It's her first job. Screaming at her freezes her. If she freezes, the front door gets clogged. If the door clogs, the kitchen stalls. Kindness is more efficient. Nathan studied her. For the first time, a flicker of something like surprise crossed his stoic face. Efficiency through empathy, he mused. That's rare. Most people confuse leadership with volume. I'm not leading, Carolyn repeated, the refrain worn thin. I'm surviving. I used to wait tables, Nathan said. The admission stopped Carolyn cold. She looked at his coat, cashmere, she realized now. The watch on his wrist was understated but Swiss. He didn't look like he had ever touched a crumb scraper. You? She asked, skepticism coloring her tone. 6 years. Through undergrad and... He hesitated. And after? The dinner shift. The frantic dreams about forgetting the ranch dressing. The burning sensation in your lower back. I know the cost of this work. The air between them shifted. The wall of customer versus server lowered by an inch. Then why come here? Carolyn asked, her guard dropping just enough to be honest. Why sit alone in a chaotic restaurant on New Year's Eve watching us drown? Because I like watching things that work, Nathan said. And you work. It's compelling. He gestured to the chair opposite him. Sit. Just for a minute. Your manager is in the walk-in cooler crying. I saw him go in. No one is watching. Carolyn shouldn't have. It was against every rule. But her feet were screaming, and the sheer absurdity of the night pushed her over the edge. She sat on the edge of the chair, ready to bolt. What do you do, Nathan? She asked. If you aren't waiting tables anymore. I fix broken things, he said vaguely. Companies. Systems. People. And you think we're broken? I think the system here is broken, he said, gesturing to the restaurant. The management is incompetent. The talent is undervalued. You're doing the job of a general manager for the wages of a server. It pays the bills, Carolyn said defensively. It's honest work. It is, he agreed. But it's small work. The noise of the restaurant seemed to fade away. The countdown on the television behind the bar started. 10. 9. Carolyn looked at him, offended and intrigued all at once. I beg your pardon. You have a mind for logistics. You understand human behavior. You have a tolerance for high-pressure environments that most Navy SEALs would envy, Nathan said, his voice intense. So I have to ask. 3. 2. 1. Cheers erupted. Confetti cannons fired. Auld Lang Syne began to play over the speakers. Nathan leaned forward, his grey eyes locking onto hers, ignoring the celebration exploding around them. Who convinced you that your place in the world was this small? The question hung in the air, heavier than the tray she had been carrying all night. It wasn't a pickup line. It wasn't small talk. It was an excavation. It dug straight through the layers of her defense mechanisms and hit the wound she had sustained 5 years ago in that lawyer's office. Carolyn opened her mouth to answer, to defend herself, to tell him about the debt and the family and the sacrifice. Carolyn. Kevin's voice shrieked from across the room. Champagne toast. Table 2. Now. The spell broke. Carolyn stood up instantly, the mask slamming back into place. Happy New Year, Nathan, she whispered. She turned and ran back into the chaos, but the question followed her. It chased her through the dining room, into the kitchen, and all the way home that night. Who decided your place is this small? For the first time in years, Carolyn didn't have an answer. The silence that followed Nathan Carpenter's declaration was so profound it seemed to absorb the light. The scent of roasted lamb and champagne suddenly felt cheap and artificial. Carolyn's mother, caught between her deepest fear, public humiliation, and her greatest hope, a sudden, inexplicable assent, stammered, I don't understand. Consultant. Is this some kind of catering gig? Nathan turned his full attention to Carolyn's mother. There was no arrogance in his posture, only an undeniable, immovable certainty. He did not raise his voice. He didn't need to. No, Nathan replied smoothly. Carolyn is being retained to consult on complex systemic restructuring for a private equity firm that buys and rehabilitates undervalued assets. Her initial task involves analyzing the logistical failures and human capital deployment of a $300 million hospitality conglomerate. He paused, letting the numbers land heavily in the opulent foyer. The position is Chief Operations Consultant, he reiterated. It is a substantial executive-level role that reports directly to me. I witnessed her capacity for management and strategic execution firsthand at Marrow and Vine. She runs a high-volume, volatile environment better than most MBAs run entire divisions. He looked directly at Uncle Marcus, who looked like his jaw had been wired shut. Her trajectory, to use your term, sir, was merely delayed by circumstance. She has not been rescued. She has been identified. Carolyn's mind was a frantic scramble of shock, vindication, and a sudden, fierce anger that this moment of validation had to be orchestrated by an outsider. Nathan was doing what she had sacrificed her own dignity to prevent her family from needing to do, confronting their ignorance with cold, undeniable facts. He opened the slim briefcase, pulling out a heavy, cream-colored folder. The package is enclosed, Nathan continued, maintaining eye contact with the entire room. It includes a base salary that begins at 4 times her current income, comprehensive equity compensation, and a mandate to completely rebuild the organizational structure of 3 major restaurant groups. He placed the folder into Carolyn's hands. The weight felt foreign. This is not a pity offer, Nathan stated, his voice ringing with finality. This is an offer structured around talent. Carolyn's skills, her ability to manage extreme pressure, her deep understanding of supply-side economics, and her efficiency through empathy, are not things learned in a classroom. They were honed over 5 years of selfless, unacknowledged labor. The dignity of that work is not diminished by the environment, it is amplified by it. The room was silent, save for the faint sound of Aunt Patricia gulping. Julianne had stopped smiling. Leo looked genuinely stunned. Carolyn looked down at the folder. She had won. The war was over. She could open this, accept, and walk out with the public validation she had been denied for years. But a new, fierce impulse surged through her, the need to reclaim the agency that Nathan, despite his good intentions, had temporarily usurped. She closed the folder with a decisive snap. "Thank you, Mr. Carpenter," Carolyn said, her voice clear, calm, and utterly controlled. She ignored her mother's frantic, wide-eyed signals. "However," she continued, her eyes meeting Nathan's for the first time since he walked through the door, "I won't be accepting anything right now." Nathan's stoic expression wavered, a flash of genuine surprise crossing his features. "I am currently scheduled to work a double shift tomorrow," Carolyn explained. "If I am to consult on systemic efficiency, the first thing I must model is professional integrity. I will deliver my 2 weeks' notice to Marrow and Vine, and I will thoroughly review this contract with an attorney before signing." She stepped closer to him, lowering her voice so only he could hear. "I appreciate the intervention, Nathan. But my worth is not determined by the shock value of your announcement. It's determined by my agreement to the terms. I'll call you when I'm ready." She pulled her own coat tighter. "You have my number," Nathan acknowledged, a faint, slow smile finally touching his lips. It was a smile of respect, not admiration. "I look forward to your call." The aftermath was surreal. Carolyn walked out the door and drove away, leaving a stunned, silent Miller family in her wake. Her mother called an hour later, hysterical with pride and confusion. "Carolyn, darling, 4 times the salary. Did you hear that? But why didn't you just say yes? You should have let me hug him." "I need time to read the contract, Mom," Carolyn explained patiently. "And I don't jump at the first offer that comes along. That's not how business works." The following day, she walked into Marrow and Vine and gave Kevin, the perpetually stressed manager, her notice. He wept openly. When she finally called Nathan 3 days later, after consulting a lawyer and revising several clauses regarding her schedule and compensation structure, a small but important act of establishing her boundaries, she didn't sound desperate. She sounded like an equal partner beginning a negotiation. "The revisions are minor, Nathan," she said over the phone. "But necessary. I start 3 weeks from Monday." "Understood," he said. "Welcome aboard, Consultant Miller." 3 months later, the Millers held an Easter gathering. Carolyn arrived late, intentionally. She was wearing a perfectly cut pantsuit, powerful, professional, and entirely her own. She didn't have to announce anything. The energy she radiated did it for her. She found her mother in the kitchen, not crying about shame, but bragging about Carolyn's new firm to a friend. When Carolyn entered the living room, no one asked, "Are you still waitressing?" Instead, Uncle Marcus approached her cautiously. "Carolyn, I was reading about your firm. Very impressed. The restructuring of the Coastal Dining Group is aggressive." He didn't offer advice. He offered analysis. Julianne approached her next, no longer radiating easy superiority, but a hint of genuine curiosity. "You know, the logistics of managing 3 concurrent turnovers. I could use some pointers. We're struggling with the Q1 reports." They weren't comparing her to Julianne anymore. They were measuring Julianne against her. Carolyn smiled, a genuine, easy smile that was no longer an attempt at composure, but a reflection of it. She spoke to them easily about asset depreciation and human resource forecasting, using the language that had been caged inside her for 5 years. She walked to the window, the same window where she had once fought back tears, and looked out at the street. She no longer saw the pale reflection of the disappointed daughter. She saw the architect of her own life. She wasn't saved. She was finally seen. Thank you so much for watching. I hope this story kept you glued to the very end. Your support means the world, and it helps bring the next chapter to life. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more engaging stories and emotional journeys. See you in the next one.